All right, let's get right at it. How to correct your cervical curve. It seems like an epidemic of late, well, the last number of decades or however long I've been paying attention, that people do not have an appropriate cervical curve. They get what's known as military spine forward cervical curve. They lose their lordosis. Their neck is kyphotic. So there are a number of ways that this can be mentioned. Ultimately, when we start looking at the neck, we have a curve, right? So this is showing what would be an ideal curve. And what you can see here, the green thing is the ligamentum nuchae, aka the nuchal ligament. So in this case, good. Hey, we got a cervical curve. I'm going to bring this picture back in a moment. People will DM me and they'll say, hey, John, here's my x-ray. Here's my cervical curve. And you can see that they were probably at a chiropractor who is showing their curve. And what'll happen is they'll put a red line on the x-ray showing the curve as it exists today. And then they'll superimpose a green line on top of that to say, hey, this is the ideal curve that we are going to go for. Now, I just want to point out that sometimes when you're looking at these x-rays online, you got to be careful for what you're seeing here, because here's one, if you just Google cervical curve, whatever, you'll find all these different x-rays. And do you see anything about this one that just might look suspicious? Just a little bit. Just take a look at this photograph here, and we're going to say, hey, before, look at that cockeyed, weird cervical curve. It's sort of like a zigzag. It's actually how my cervical curve has been in the past. And then you'll see this after. It's like, oh my gosh, that's such a nice curve. That's starting to look like the unicorn curve that we're talking about. Well, notice the pitch of this guy's head here at this angle. And then notice the pitch of this guy's head here at this angle. You can see the before picture, his face is actually pretty vertical, which is much more in tune with how we carry ourselves as human beings, or should, in a sense, carry ourselves with our face sort of in this position here. This one, it looks like he's tilting his head pretty significantly far back. So is this really a restored curve, or is this smoke and mirrors? I will let you decide. Here's another one that came up. I just decided to print these out because, before picture here, you can see the angle of the guy's face. You can see the curve of his neck. And then here we see this, again, this restoration of a curve. And of course, this tall guy looks way better, but just, do you see how he's now tilting his head back? Now, if I see a client who keeps, and there's a good chance you're already doing this, because most people are sort of off with what they're doing with their head. If you're keeping your chin up in order to keep your posture, you're doing it wrong. What we want to be able to do is we want to effectively get into the nuchal ligament. So we want to be able to get into the nuchal ligament and teach this ligament how to do its job of stabilizing our cervical spine and our skull, but also helping to integrate the entire intrinsic kinetic chain into play, and then the other five, or four others and 5 total kinetic chains into play with the nuchal ligament. And, conceptually, this is where people will go. And this is what I did a long time ago, and it did not work, is they're going to go to some sort of traction. This guy here, they were using a Denny roll. Now, a Denny roll, that would be the recommendation if you're going to do some sort of cervical traction, back-bending traction. I would use a Denny roll over a lot of these other gadgets that are out there, but there are a ridiculous number of gadgets. In general, though, this whole concept of traction is missing the mark for me, and I recommend that you not do this. Or if you do something like this, do it on a very limited basis and then get on the work. This is what's missing with these traction systems, where the concept here is, well, hey, this person has a military spine, they have a forward cervical curve, so we're gonna bend her neck backwards. And this is what a chiropractor did with me back in 2005, had me sit in a chair at about this angle and had me sit with my neck bent over backwards with a strap over my forehead and about 30 pounds of weights pulling my head off the back of my body. It did not restore my cervical curve, and it created a lot of segmental instability at my thoracic spine. Ultimately, what we need to be doing is we need to be taking a look at the entire body, so the entire totem pole from the feet all the way through to the head, and we need to get everything completely integrated and working together. What's the thoracic spine doing? What's the lumbar spine doing? What's the cervical spine doing? If you're doing isolated traction events, you're at the cervical spine and just bending your neck backward and then hoping that this restores your curve, you're not going to get a lot accomplished. You're just not going to get a lot accomplished. You need to get your muscle system in play. You need to get your fascia network in play. You need to get your pontomedullary reticular formation, your primal brain, in play. And that happens through how we're using our eyes relative to how we're using our face, how we're using our skull, how we're using our shoulders, how we're using our body. We need to get stronger, 1% stronger a day in a very tensegrity, sound manner. Tension, integrity, tensegrity. We need to get our entire body working as a unit and just cranking our heads backwards off of a thing or over a roller or over a device or getting it cranked on by some device is going to fall short of your overall desire to get your posture where you want it to be. So in all fairness, hey, here are my x-rays. So this was me in 2017. You can see I've got this forward cervical curve. I actually got a little bit of a zigzag pattern going on. And a year later is when I created and serendipitously activated my nuchal ligament at the back of my head. This thing here, sticking out of the back of my neck, which was never sticking out. That thing sticking out is the nuchal ligament, the secret weapon and missing link of the human species. You're going to activate it by doing the Northern Star as a beginning exercise. So you're going to be on your back. You might need a pillow here. You may not have the range of motion that I have in my thoracic spine, my lumbar spine, my cervical spine. So depending on who you are, we might put a little pillow in here. We might put a towel under here. But the idea is you're using forces out of your serratus anterior to weaponize your elbows and forces to expand your rib cage all the way around, particularly your lower back rib cage needs to expand. You're using gentle forces with your hands, just touching your head. You're not really pulling on your head, but you're enticing the back of your head to reach north while the skin on your upper back gets pulled south. This is going to allow for your nuchal ligament to get very light tensions. As you're getting the very light tension at your nuchal ligament, you're able to use muscularity of your tongue and your cranial muscles and all of the intrinsic kinetic chain muscles. You're using these muscles to activate a curve in your neck. This is how you're going to restore the curve in your neck. This, not this weird tomfoolery, this bogus crap. Now, maybe you need to use a Denny roll to do a little bit of segmental traction, a little bit, but then get rid of that and do this. We need to hit the floor. We need to consciously activate, strengthen our body, and use these forces and understand that ligaments do not respond like muscles. I can cash out my muscles In 30 to 90 seconds, ligaments need 10, 15, 20 minutes of steady state forces in order to get them to respond. Otherwise, they're just not going to respond. It goes beyond this one exercise. We will teach you the exercise inside of Freeborn Neck Protocol, and you need to do the work. You need to practice and get into all 5 kinetic chains. And this is what you're going to do to get your cervical spine to work right again, is it has to work right with your entire body. Your lumbar spine needs to be predominantly involved with strengthening you in forward flexion and back extension on the sagittal plane. The thoracic spine needs to be predominantly working on side flexions, translations, articulations, and the cervical spine needs to be working on rotations, but really predominantly from a articulation standpoint. In life, we don't do these fixed rotations. It's the weirdest thing that these are the exercises that we're teaching people when we don't move that way. We move with articulation. What's that over there? What's this over here? This is an articulation that's bringing into play your thoracic spine to get the cervical spine working properly. All right, peace, love, I'm a dove, I'm out of here. Let's get this thing done. Good day.